Welcome, everyone, to our interactive panel discussion on the UN Sustainable Development Goals we're calling Target 2030. My name is Lance Gould, and I'm the editorial director of Earth's Call, and I'll be playing the role of Weaver today. It'll be my job to ensure that the audience gets to take part in the discussions. Further, for interactivity, during the session there will be a butcher block paper stand right up front over there, in which we will have a scribe, who is Blonitha Donahue. Applause for her. And she will be taking notes on insights, fresh ideas, and actions. At the end of the session, we invite you to visit the paper stand and to checkmark the ideas that you like best, the ones that most resonate with you, and you will be free to add your own headlines as well. At the end of the day, all of the panels from Harmonizing the Future Today will report these most popular headlines back to our culminating town hall event. And now, without further ado, let me introduce the host and moderator for today's session, renowned journalist and Earth Call board member, Oberta Baskin.
Good morning. How are you doing? Yeah. Wasn't that amazing? Those Compton kids and all. It's just, my heart is exploding. I think, maybe the altitude is part of it too, but mostly it's the love vibes and this beautiful setting and Earth's calling to all of us. I mean, yeah, that's why we're here. So we're going to talk about Target 2030 in part is about the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN, it's the first time in the whole world that anything happened unanimously. All the nations voted on the SDGs. And the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals. 17 is about partnerships, which is one of my very favorite ones, because that's how we're going to get stuff done. We can't continue to work in silos. We need to, and we can't compete. We need to be collaborating. So I actually started back, even before the UN voted on them in 2015, I adopted them for something called Aim to Flourish that I founded, which was teaching the Sustainable Development Goals to business school students all over the world, because they're the next leaders. They're the ones who are going to have to create the world that we all want by 2030. And so we created a platform for them. We asked them to go out and interview somebody who had created an innovation that is in one way or another aligned with one of the SDGs. We now have nearly 2,000 stories, all written by business school students, and they're incredible stories. And I think the most exciting thing about it is that the students say that it changes the trajectory of what they want to do, that they want to do something with a social impact. Remember the business school students of the 1980s? They wanted a Porsche. The students of today in 2019 in business school, they want to get shit done, if you'll excuse me for saying. Thank you. Thank you for the permission for that, because I do feel very guilty about the world that my generation created, the sort of selfishness, just thinking that we could continue to plunder the planet and compete with each other. And now, as you've heard from the youth in this room and from the concert last night, I have so much hope that we're going to be able to change the world. We have to do it by 2030. We really have less than, that's 11 years. We have less than 10 years to get this right. So I want to bring in the amazing panelists that we have. Tom Steyer, come on in. Yeah. Carol Stern and Bart Houlihan and Tommy Chiptajaya, all the way from Jakarta. So I want to start with Bart. And I promise we'll open it up, just like Lance said. We're gonna bring you into this conversation. Bart is the founder of the B Corp movement, co-founder of the B Corp. So spectacular. There are 2,400 B Corps out there. They are changing the world because they've learned that, you can make money and do good at the same time. So it's business for good. But it's not like just a touchy-feely thing, although you like sound some kind of drum or something when you have your meetings, I think, or a bell?
A bell.
A bell, okay. But it's really metrics. I mean, you can't be a B Corp if you are treating your employees really well, but not treating the environment very well. It's all based on, and I want just talk a little bit, just a little introduction about what it means to be a B Corp.
Sure. So big picture, folks, we're trying to build a movement of people using business as a force for good. The approach is really simple. We find leaders, and we certify them as certified B corporations. We shine a light on them, and then encourage other companies to be more like a B Corp. To be a B corporation, you got to do three things. You got to take and pass an impact assessment that looks at everything you do. Your impact on governance, consumers, community, environment, and workers. Secondly, and this is even a little more difficult, you have to rewrite your governance so that you align your mission with your governance. And that's a big deal. It fundamentally changes fiduciary duty, and it means that companies are obligated to consider not just their shareholders, but also the impact of their decisions on all of their stakeholders, employees, community, and the environment. We have about now closing in on 3,000 certified B corporations in 64 countries. And we work with about another 100,000 companies that are trying to be more like a B Corp. And so that's what we do.
So the companies that are trying to be more like or get certification as a B Corp, this is really interesting. I really invite you to check out the website, because what companies do is they take the certification, which is free, and they look at and they see, hey, we're doing okay in terms of transparency, but we're not so good on the environment. We have work to do. And they tell their stories, and it inspires them to do better.
That's right.
Okay, so what are you doing in terms of aligning companies with the Sustainable Development Goals? Because companies, I hear this all the time, that they're intrigued by the SDGs, the global goals, we want to do it, but we don't know how. How?
Yeah, so here's the deal. We are not going to reach these goals without the engagement of business. Business represents more than 3/4 of the U.S. GDP. We have to recognize that government and nonprofit, super necessary, but insufficient. Business has to be at this table. Here's the good news. 72% of CEOs actually talk about the SDGs in their annual reports. Here's the bad news. Only 23% of them actually have targets and goals. The truth is they don't know where to start. And so what we're trying to do is to take that impact assessment we use for certification and reframe it around the SDGs so that companies can measure, manage, and improve their performance towards the 2030 targets. And so that's what we're fundamentally doing. That platform will launch at the end of 2020. And it's just trying to make it easy, right? Give people an easy way to begin to understand the impact of their business and how they can advance these goals.
Which brings us to Carol Stern, who has been heading UNICEF USA and is an activist and a mother and a grandmother and has been, fighting for children's rights basically all your life. And UNICEF, I think it's like one of the most, it gets more done in terms of children around the world for less money than any other organization. So Carol, the segue to you is really, you have this passion for private and public partnerships, that when companies say, we don't know how to do that or whatever, you figure it out for them.
We hope so. And we love what BART is doing. I mean, this is really, I think, the missing piece to the public-private partnership equation.
Shop
it really
around
is.
B Corps also. Look for the B Corp on a business card or in an ad or anything. That's where you want to, that's where you want to put your money.
The reality is, if we're going to reach the SDGs, right now we have a $2.5 trillion funding gap. And so historically, if we kept going the way we were going and said to corporate America in particular, my area, write us a check. Well, write us a check isn't going to get us there because we know we're not going to raise those dollars. And so we began several years ago to look at how do we capitalize on industry in particular for the expertise you bring to the table, the skills you bring to the table, the thinking that may be different than ours. And just to give you two really quick examples, the two that I got most excited about, one is we have something called U-Report. We really wanted to make sure that the things we're sending are actually getting in the hands of children. So, we work in 190 countries, 14,000 boots on the ground. I can track the package through customs. I can track it to the UNICEF staff person. I can track it even to the chief of the tribe in the village. But I want to know, does the child get it? So we've got kids reporting to us now. And U-Report has, right now, roughly about 2 million kids who report to us on several times a day. And so trying to sort through all of that was horrific. How do you get through all of those messages? So we reached out to Google, and Google created the algorithms for us that allow us to actually use the data that we're getting. We're also sitting on probably the most data about children of anybody right now. Second example, though, I think is a little more concrete. When the Ebola crisis struck, we were, all caught very off guard by the Ebola crisis, and we had to figure out how far it was spreading, how quickly it was spreading, was the information we were giving youth in particular, but adults as well, about how to protect themselves, reaching the people. And Facebook came into the picture and gave us aggregated data. So we were able to read the chatter, not knowing whose chatter it was, but we were able to track how that disease spread by using Facebook chatter, and therefore we were also able to see how well our messages of protection were being heard, if at all, and to change them in the moment for that.
Carol, I want you to share your wearable watch.
Okay, so, and actually I don't have it on today, which
What?
I'm so bummed.
What were you thinking?
I know. Okay, so this is a great story. So the UN, and I've shared this before, but the UN writes a lot of reports. And I wish I could tell people that I read them, but some I do. And so on a given day, I walk in my office and there are two reports on my desk. One that says 1 in 4 children in America is underactive, and that's why we have such a high rate of heart disease, and why we will see the first generation of Americans whose lifespan is not expected to be longer than their parents, and also diabetes, obesity, all the crises. The other report, and really coincidentally, my assistant had just put them on my desk next to each other, said 1 in 4 children around the world is severely, acutely malnourished. If we do nothing, they will die. I wish I could tell you I created this. I did not. I have an amazing young man who works for me, Rajesh Anandan. I gave him both reports. I said 1 in 4, 1 in 4, come back, give me an idea. There's got to be something we can do. We're wasting it. They need it. Come back with something. And he created something called Kid Power. He came back and he said, imagine if we could get a low-cost fitness band and give it to kids in schools where 75% or more are on food assistance themselves, because they're the most apt to not have access to exercise equipment or Little League, and because food assistance often doesn't give them, fresh vegetables. And so let's see if we could do this. And we'll challenge them to walk 12,500 steps a day. That's the Americans' recommended number. And for every 2,500 steps they walk, it'll do something. It'll light up, it'll buzz, it'll be a really exciting moment, and they'll earn a point. And for every 10 points they earn, we'll get some underwriters to help us deliver Plumpy Nut, which is nutritionally enhanced paste, to children who are starving. And it'll be great, because American kids will get healthy, overseas kids will get what they need. Not one, well, let me just tell you, we got a little better. Don't clap yet. So, but I'll take it in a minute. So we went to every single business that made fitness bands, and no one would make us a low-cost
All said
band.
no, thank you.
All
That's
said
just,
no.
What?
So we instead were stupid enough to say, we'll just do a startup in-house and we'll make it ourselves. So we did.
Oh, cool.
So we made it ourselves. The cool thing is it's for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. We went to Kathy Kennedy at Lucasfilms, and I tell you, this truly was a cold call to Kathy about 3.5 years ago. We had a mutual friend, so I got my call in, but we didn't know each other. And I said, you're about to release Star Wars. It'd be really cool if this could be a Star Wars product. And she made us the force for change. They gave us the $1 million to develop the product. We went to Target stores. We said, all right, we've got a band. Will you sell it for us? Because the profits will pay for the program. They said, look, we'll give you $1 million to put it in classrooms, and we'll put it online. But it probably, it won't be a big seller. Someone comes in for a Fitbit, they're not buying a Star Wars band.
Did it sell?
So Pink launched the program for us on Good Morning America. In 4 hours, Target depleted their entire stock. So now you can applaud. We have, the program's been active for 2 years. 500,000 kids in the program across America right now. They've saved the lives of over 80,000 kids around the world.
Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah. Give it up for Carol. Such a cool story. Yes. If you can't get it done out there, just do it yourself, right? We all have to do it ourselves right now in terms of the climate crisis. So Tommy from Jakarta was the first Flourish Prize winner that we had for Aim to Flourish, because we give out these awards, one for each of the 17 goals. And it's a company that a student at IPMI in Jakarta wrote about, where they were making plastic bags for the supermarkets that would pile up in a landfill for 500 years and end up in the water. And they switched to making them biodegradable in 2 weeks out of tapioca, supporting the cassava farmers with a living wage in a co-op. I mean, it's just such a beautiful story. And Tommy has spent years, he graduated from the University of Chicago and, has all these pedigrees, Harvard, and went back to Jakarta to do good and to help his country. And it's really about the materials that you make and your passion for the environment and saving the planet. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roberta. I think I used to be a management consultant as well with Boston Consulting Group, where I learned a lot about companies, about businesses, about building lasting businesses. But then what got me thinking is that, look, what brought us here today as a society is not going to bring us forward. Really, it's just not nearly enough what businesses are doing. Philanthropic is much needed, but CSR, for instance, is barely enough funds, because what you do, the arithmetic alone doesn't match, right? You make money for 100% in business. Out of the net profit, you take away 2% to help NGO fix the problem that you caused in the first place, 100%. So it's just the arithmetic alone. So we need a new breed of business that actually, in a fragmented society these days, these business needs to build bridges across all the shared communities. So what we have when we launch this is that, look, with a partner where we have the IP, he researched technology for 10 years. We patented in the US and Singapore. The IP is meant to be innovate on the materials using indigenous crops that grow a lot in Indonesia. So we get all these farmers, cooperatives, to harvest the cassava for us, and we get the starch, and we turn it into material that goes into plastic substitute, because then you try to solve the existing problems. That is, the whole world has been awake now about the plastic pollutions, but at the same time you try to drag all these farmers behind you together so that they get better livelihoods through the modern objects, because otherwise the cassava, there's oversupply and they're just not being optimized properly. So we try to have a business that is sustainable and with a really good bottom line, financially sustainable, but also environmental impact and social impact that is possible together. So I really strongly believe at the end of the day, we are also social enterprise with Schwab in World Economic Forum. So I told Professor Schwab that, look, social entrepreneurs as a species should extinct in 10 years, because we should not exist. All entrepreneurs should by definition be social entrepreneurs and with understanding of the environmental impact. Yeah, so that's what we do.
Which reminds me of something that, Bart, you have said, which is your goal for B Corps is that they're not needed in 30 years, that all companies behave as business for good.
Hopefully sooner.
I hope so too.
I don't know if we have 30 years, Roberta, so hopefully sooner.
Yes. Tom, you are so committed and passionate about kids, and 2030 is 11 years away, and it's really too long in terms of turning around what is a critical moment in our world. Do you see kids as being the ones that are going to accomplish this? You have 4 of them.
So, before I do anything else, I'd like to thank these 3 people for what they're doing. It's pretty amazing. Seriously. I really think they deserve an enormous amount of credit. So the question was, what about kids? Look, I think that when I look at trying to change this, let me give you two quick frameworks. One is, what is it we're trying to frame? What are we trying to change? And I asked someone who I think is really smart, who's from Aspen, Colorado, named Hal Harvey, for those of you who know him. What do we have to accomplish in terms of greenhouse gases between now and 2030 to avoid 2C? So for most people, these words mean nothing, but I figure this crowd knows what that means. Okay, and he said, and he quoted me something based on 2010 levels. He said, look, I don't know what the 2010 levels are. I want it from today, if you don't mind. And he came back after a couple of weeks of work and said, for us to avoid 2C by 2030, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally by 32% from today. By the way, they're going up on average by 1.5% per year. So really we have to go from going up by 1.5 to going down by 3.5% per year to avoid 2C, not 1.5C. So that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is this, and I am going to get around to kids, I promise. But the second thing I'd say is this. When I think about economies and systems and countries, I think about it in the United States, it's like a car. If you want the car to work, you need the democracy to tell you where to go, to drive the car, and you need the private enterprise system to power the car. And when you mix the two up, you get in a terrible position, which is where we are now, because we have a ton of corruption in our system that involves the companies deciding where we're going to go. What we need is the democracy, the people deciding where we're going to go and making the rules, and then the companies make that happen within the rules that the people decide.
Yeah.
And so, now that I've given you my preamble, let me give you the answer on
Next
kids.
generation America.
Biggest generation in American history is people under the age of 35. Most diverse generation in American history, most progressive generation in American history, traditionally voted half the rates of other American citizens. In 2014, so the last midterm election, they turned out at 21%. 1 out of 5 people voted, which obviously means we don't have a working democracy. If almost 80% of Americans don't vote in that age group, then they aren't represented the same as everybody else. Elected officials don't think of them equivalently because what they care about is voters, not people. So what we did was, our organization believes in the answer to corruption is democracy. The way that we beat the money is with the people. So what we try and do is engage as many people in underrepresented populations as we can, which means young people, because by definition, young people are dramatically underrepresented. Nationwide in 2018, so last year's midterms, people under 30 went from 21% to 31%. Now that's just a straight up reaction to fear of what was going on. They voted with a 44% spread D to R, 72-28, and we were organized a congressional district, including Bart's wife's congressional district. And so where
Chrissy Houlihan,
yeah, who's
one of the new representatives, the freshman class of women. Give it up for Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
So in the places we were in all flips. We were in 37 districts trying to turn red to blue, and the turnout went from 18% to 41%. So my answer to the question that Roberta asked me is, what can young people do? If, in fact, we get equal participation through our society by age group, by income level, by ethnicity and race, then, in fact, we will solve this problem. That, in fact, the American people want us to do the right thing. You can see it. The majority of Republicans want us to do the right thing on this. The overwhelming majority of young people, this is their issue because they believe that a polluted, dangerous earth will change their life dramatically for the worse and that they will dealing with amazing problems. So the answer to the question is, if in fact we get a working democracy, we will solve this problem. But unless we do, we won't. And I'll give you one last story, which always sticks in my mind. After Pearl Harbor, FDR went to the big three auto companies and said, we need you to start making tanks and planes and ships. We need to be able to catch the Axis. They're much more developed than we are. We're way behind. What can you do? And so those guys who were patriotic Americans took a weekend and said, we can do 20%. We will take 20% of our production and we will turn it over directly to the United States of America to build whatever you need. And FDR said, okay, I have a counter proposal. You will do 100%, or I will shut you down. That's your choice. And we didn't make a passenger car between then and the end of the war. That, when you talk about 32%, the United States needs to change dramatically, and then we need to lead the rest of the world, because who's going to believe us if we haven't made a move?
Tom, do you think that there could be something like a climate crisis youth corps where students, before they go to college, they take a year and work on the climate crisis?
So I do think this is their issue. And from my standpoint, what we'd like and what we try and encourage is as much volunteerism and participation politically as possible, because we believe that's the biggest multiplier of their efforts. And in fact, we do a ton of that. We're on 420 campuses. But what we try and do is get volunteers, but also in terms of people who are working 20 hours a week, we actually try and pay them specifically so that kids who aren't well-to-do can afford the $20, the 20 hours a week. They don't have to work in Target or McDonald's. They can come do something politically that they're dying to do anyway, but that they can now afford to, so they can have food and can afford the things that they need while they're students.
Great. All of this gives me so much hope. I spent 30 years doing stories about corporate misconduct. That was my beat. I was all about, companies, what they were doing in terms of wrecking people's health, or putting poison in the water, or sweatshops in Indonesia and Vietnam. And I think a lot of those stories left people with despair and apathy. I mean, on a good day, you could get something done. But the turnaround in terms of telling stories about who's doing it right, where you should spend your money in terms of companies that are trying to change the world, what you see here, I think is so much more hopeful. People are not wanting to watch the evening news, or because it's just it's miserable. So these are the stories that need to be told and shared. And we're splitting our time with you. So we have half an hour to hear from my weaver, Lance. What's going on in terms of audience?
Well, the insights and fresh ideas are really piling up. Thank you to Blonda for recording all this, and everyone should visit this after the session to see what we have so far. But I'd like to ask the audience what you've heard so far. What has really scared you, and what has given you hope, and what has inspired you? So I'll have a microphone on this side, and we'll have somebody else on the other side. One right here.
And say your name and where you're from.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarai Fuladi. I'm the founder, CEO, and electrical engineer behind Jara. So currently, there's 262 million out-of-school children today, and 1 billion children in poverty. And unfortunately, these numbers are going to increase with the increase of climate disasters. How can we expect for Gen Z and Gen Alpha to solve our climate crisis when they don't have the quality education they need to succeed? So we're doing something at JAR about it. We've co-created and invented a solution alongside communities in post-disaster zones, refugee camps, and more, called the JAR Unit. It's a personal education device that enables a child to learn anytime, anywhere off the grid. It charges with crank power, solar power, and more, updatable with content custom to the region. My fear is the world doesn't know. The world's not talking about this education crisis we're in. And the world doesn't understand the connection between educating a child and solving the climate crisis. So how can we create virality around increasing access to education and how that's going to more or less save the world?
That is goal 4, quality education with the Sustainable Development Goals. And even though, goal 13 is climate action, all 17 goals are about climate action. They're all interrelated because we can't be in silos. So education is crucial. Who else?
We have one right here.
My name is Hank Rogers. I'm the founder and funder of the Blue Planet Foundation. We started by working to end the use of carbon-based fuel in Hawaii. We have passed lots and lots of legislation, but our biggest piece of success, I would say, is we were the first state in the country to have 100% renewable mandate. Yeah. So 100% by 2045. And we are now helping 8 other states with the same legislation. So that's called our Repower program. And we're looking for partners around the country. And I'm starting a new alliance, a new organization, and this is going to be based in New York. And we're going to do the same thing with countries. So I want the movement to be to move countries to have a mandate of 100% renewable by 2045. 2045 is a good date because it's 5 years ahead of the IPCC, and it's the 100th anniversary of the United Nations. Mm-hmm. What better ending for climate change than the 100th anniversary? We can celebrate the end of World War III.
Yeah.
So I just want to say it's not just a wish, we mandate, and now we switched from creating the legislation to keeping their toes on to the fire. We do a yearly report card, and I think everybody should do a report card for their jurisdiction, their state, their city, their country, so that everybody, all their politicians know what's going on. And the electric company who's fighting us from the get-go has finally turned around and said, we can do this by 2040, and it will save ratepayers $7 billion.
Wow. Aloha. And thank you for moving east. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Good morning. Elizabeth Halliday, Clean Capitalist Leadership Council. My question relates to goal number 9, infrastructure and innovation. All of you have quite a position of influence. What are you doing for regulatory reform? A lot of regulations, especially as they relate to transmission and generation, stymie development. For instance, North Carolina wants to build a wind plant, however, they got to bring the transmission cable in Virginia, and it becomes onerous with the regulations in Virginia to make that happen. How can we change the regulatory environment to allow businesses to start implementing these infrastructure changes we so desperately need?
So I would just say to you, we talked about public-private partnership, but it isn't only the NGO and the corporation. The third, leg on the stool has to be government. And, I've seen this, and it's part of why, I can only speak for my organization at the UN, but we work both upstream and downstream because it's not, in my business, and I'll speak to the education crisis, we could build a lot of schools, but until governments guarantee there's going to be a girls' latrine so girls can go to that school, till they guarantee there's going to be a teacher who is actually trained to teach, it doesn't matter that the building's there. So it is about changing regulations simultaneous to bringing different knowledge together and actually building the structure.
But Elizabeth, there's, as I know you know, so I'm not saying anything that you don't know. Look, who gets elected makes a gigantic difference. And it really is a question to get back to who gets elected, but also can you do direct democracy? Last year we did 3 propositions in Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada to do 50% clean energy by 2030. So if you can't do a direct proposition to get the kinds of things they have in Hawaii, then you have to have a governor or elected public utility commissioners or whatever the relevant people are who share your values, who know it's important, and who are going to insist. And in fact, if you look at Virginia, or any of those, or North Carolina, The people who get elected are going to determine what that public utility is forced to do, and that public utility, in many cases, but by no means all, may push back really hard the way they did in Hawaii until they realize that they can be very profitable being clean.
And just a yes and to build on that, so the work that our community is focused on is a single issue, upending shareholder primacy. That fundamentally, we got to get to root causes here. And one of the root causes for corporations is they have one legal obligation. That is to their shareholders. We have passed laws in 38 states to create a new legally recognized corporate form called a benefit corporation. It is now passed in 2 other countries. It's on the way in 12 other countries thereafter. But fundamentally, unless we change the rules, folks, unless there is a legal obligation for corporations to think about something other than just maximizing private wealth, we have a much larger challenge. And so that's the effort that we have, is it's solely focused on making sure we get rid of shareholder primacy as the law of the land.
I want to put in a word also, because I live in Virginia, and my husband and I, right over there, decided to put solar panels on the house, and we were told, and we did it, but it was really hard to find an installer because they're all working in Maryland and DC because there's no incentive in Virginia because the utilities have lobbied the State House. And also you can't generate more than 50% of your needs in Virginia. So there's work to be done. And that, as Carol said, it's not just public-private partnerships, it's government too.
One quick housekeeping note. We have about 23 minutes left, and there's so many people who want to ask questions. So if I could ask, just
Yes.
say your name and get right to your question. That way we can get more questions. So here's the next one.
Hi, I'm Nathan Gray. I'm the president of Geoversity, based in Panama. I was actually delighted to have a grandfather start our morning this morning, my brother, Chief Phil Lane Jr. I'm a grandfather. In my early 20s, I started an organization called Oxfam America, based in Boston, and came from years of deep concern about injustice, poverty, and the chronic manifestations of those challenges. In our work in creating our campus in Panama, now 12,000 acres, we've had to confront the reality of desperately poor and isolated rural people in a part of the world, and this is so typical all over, where the center, the capital center, is absorbing everything and sucking energy and everything else. The rural conditions are abominable. And the indigenous of Panama, 7 indigenous nations, are in trouble precisely because they are away from the capital. And so my question is, and I'm delighted to see what I find to be very much a big power and media access, powerful network at work. I'm not seeing enough of our connectivity to the isolated rural poor. I'm not seeing also enough connectivity to some of the more powerful forces that we're up against. Ranchers, the trade deal with China sucking up massive amounts of export of beef. And so I ask, what are some of your thoughts about how we can bridge those differences and those challenges? Thank you.
Anybody want to take it? Thank you.
I would say that obviously I think it reflects a lot of what we have said. I know for UNICEF, Tony Lake, who was the former executive director at the UN, made a decision that there were lots of organizations of great merit working in most of the cities across the world, but that we were going to go for the furthest out, the hardest to reach, because those were the kids who were being left behind. And so there is a true commitment to working in ways, which is why I chose to take the invitation and come today, ways in which this group is working, that with children on that board, with children's voices, so that we're not dictating the solutions for those communities, but they're building them with us. And I do think that is the only way we're going to change that.
I also, I think about when the guy in the White House pulled out of the Paris Treaty and said, I don't represent Paris, I represent Pittsburgh, the mayor of Pittsburgh stood up and said, no, you don't. I represent Pittsburgh, and we're going to adhere to the Paris Treaty. We're going to get it done. So there is a movement in cities and states with governors and mayors across the country. In some ways, I think the guy in the White House has incentivized people who understand that this is a crisis.
Can I take a shot at that? So,
Take a shot at that.
I mean, we see the exact same thing in the United States, of course. And I think that you actually hit on the word that I think is the most important, which is connectivity. So when we look at rural U.S., being from California, when we look at the valley versus the coast, we can see dramatic differences in income level, dramatic differences in education and health and pollution. So in every single metric, you can see that the valley is, in effect, the people there are being picked on. And so the only thing that I've been able to see as working is connectivity on a host of measures that would enable those people to actually be part of the bigger whole. And when I think about it from the standpoint, I actually think the UN's point, and I think your point, about having a system that's holistic, so that instead of trying to solve one problem by itself, you recognize, and I'd get back to the issue about education of kids around the world. When I think about what would save the climate, and you look at what people have examined, it turns out that the education specifically of girls might be the most important thing we do in the whole world. And so I do think it's the connectivity, like broadband, like roads, all those things, but I think it's also a connectivity of ideas where you understand that it is all connected, and we won't solve the poverty issue and the climate issue separately, but that in effect it's going to be a justice issue as you originally suggested.
Tommy?
Yeah, I think just to expand on that thoughts a little bit further is that we need to go beyond these hyper-individualism as well. We need to go back to the concept of common good and communities, because at the end of the day, even we go beyond US, right? We shared this world, we shared this earth together, we shared this home together, and anything happens in our neighbors and anywhere will have repercussions. 1.5 million refugees from Syria overrun Europe. If climate change happens, there'll be 40 million people, let's say, from Bangladesh. I hope it never happens. I wonder what will happen to the world. And if we don't really together have this connectivity and exchange, and that's based on the understanding that we do share all these together. And guess what? It actually, when we start doing that, when we start connecting, it's actually enriching our lives as well as a person. So it is actually like God built into us these sense of we want to connect. We actually enjoy these connection rather than, closing ourselves in our own room playing video games or something, right? That's only good for until a certain moment. So that mindset is utterly important.
Roberta, Tom was noting that about the importance of educating young women, and we have a question here from a young woman who would like to say something.
Hi, we are a nonprofit organization called the Compton Kids Club. And we want to give a huge thank you to Tom because he has inspired us with all the changes that he's made civically and socially, and he's really encouraged us and inspired us and let us know that it doesn't matter how young we are, we have a voice and we can make a change too. And that's why this summer we'll be going on a We Care tour where we'll be going and performing all across the globe and speaking to youth and letting them know that they have a voice and they can use it. So thank you.
Let's hear it for the Compton Kids Club. Woo, woo, woo.
I just want to quick double click on what Tommy was saying also about climate refugees. We all learned last night at the concert about the third pole, which is the Himalayas. I mean, we hear a lot about the North Pole and the South Pole and about polar bears, but there's hundreds of millions of people who are downstream of those glaciers in the third pole. And think about the climate refugees in terms of avalanches and and mudslides and droughts, and then eventually drought. There will be no water, and that's hundreds of millions of people who will lose their home. Yes.
My name is Ernie Pinas. I'm an holistic engineer and inventor. I just want to mention one thing about corruption. I heard the name corruption. I heard the word of corruption, and the reason I'm standing here is because of corruption. I was born in Suriname, and actually I work all over the world doing things on renewable energy. I had my first patent 30 years ago when the word renewable energy was not even mainstream. And I went to Europe, get my degree, and went back to my country. Wanted to inspire youth and wanted to teach them everything I had to learn in 35 years within a short period. I started writing my book, and doing your renewable energy stuff is not mainstream. So we get a lot of people against that, and we were robbed of everything. And 1 year ago, we had the most green showroom in the Netherlands in 2005 with 16 renewable energy technology, geothermal, solar, you name it, biomass. 1 year ago, my wife and I, who lived 20 years in the US, we decided to come to the US to help to change the energy world in the US. Now, you can, even with some small things, you can drop the energy use in the US by 20, 30, 40%. It's not rocket science. So now I'm writing a book here in the US, I'm about to publish, to bring that to the market and share the information. And my question about corruption, I was in a position, we had some money left to come to the States, to bring the word out and to share our knowledge with the world. There are hundreds, thousands out there who have maybe even bigger voice than I have, but they are not in the position to share the words, to go out of the corruption and share the words. My question is how you help those people in those countries, especially youth.
So one of the things that UNICEF is doing is we've taken our innovation labs out of the United States and put them in developing nations. Because one of the things that we've seen, if you want to see real innovation, when your life depends on something, you will innovate. And so in the developing nations, we're seeing greater ideas coming than we are from some of the most
refugee
educators, inventors, right? So that is one of the ways that we're helping.
Hi, my name is Kelly Nordini. I'm the Executive Director of Conservation Colorado. Welcome to Colorado. For our out-of-town guests, I thought you might like to know that just this month, Colorado became the only fossil fuel producing state in the country, besides California, to put economy-wide science-based carbon reduction targets in statute, just this month.
Yes.
And, it's huge. And my question for the panel is, how do we take this success story that's happening in the states that Roberta and Tom and others have alluded to and amplify it and really make sure that that is driving the story nationally, not what's coming out of Washington, D.C.?
Shouldn't there be a climate crisis show, a program on a daily basis? What's going on around the world to share information? Yeah. Yes. Where are you, Lance? Okay. Sorry.
How are you doing? Thank you so much for everything all you guys are doing. It's amazing. My name is Rod Richardson. I'm the president of the Grace Richardson Fund. Our mission is to pioneer new, high-impact, free market policy solutions to critical issues that are in gridlock. And we target critical issues in gridlock because they're a threat to our democracy. They drive polarization. So we think that there's no issue that's more pressing than climate because that is really driving, at the heart of driving polarization in this country. And not only is it a threat to our democracy, it's a threat to the planet. So if you can solve that, you really have a big solution. I'd like to say, in response to this gentleman's question about what inspires us, I think, Tommy and Bart and Tom and you too at UNICEF, all of you are pioneering clean capitalism in what you're doing. You're at the tip of a new revolution in the clean capitalist revolution field. Now, one thing that makes me worried though about what I heard this morning is that we're including a lot of people in this conversation that need to be here, but there are a lot of people who are not here. Okay, and if you're looking for transformative ideas that are outside the box, that are going to have ultra high impact, you need to have ideas that bring everybody in. Okay, and there's nobody here in this audience more outside the box in some ways than I am, because I'm a classic conservative. So I'm a classic conservative that's coming in saying we need an answer to climate change, and we need an answer to climate change that can bring in my fellow conservatives. Okay, and they're not going to go for the Green New Deal. They're not going to go for carbon taxes. They're not going to go for climate socialism. But they will go for other ideas. So
We'll go for what?
Well, I want to give you a couple of insights.
Could we just keep it? We're really running out of time, so please keep it to a question for the panel so we can get as many people as possible.
Yes, we have 9 minutes.
Sure.
We should do lightning round.
Sure. What I want to tell you is this, is that, we've seen a transformation in this economy, this clean capitalist transformation. And it's not just you doing things, it's actually clean cap technologies have gone from unprofitable to profitable. And we've seen the growth of the green bond market. This gives us new policy solutions that we can use. We can cut the tax rates on those profits. We can use supply-side tax cuts for this stuff. We can take those green bonds and make them tax-exempt private green bonds and loans. We can pull new policy solutions that create clean free markets. We can deregulate power markets. We can end corruption in the third world with incentives that pull these countries into giant clean free markets characterized by no taxes and low tariffs. There's a set of ideas that are being pioneered now that are ultra high impact, that can move the needle and can bring conservatives into this game, but they need to be included here in the conversation.
And I want to include more people in the conversation, and we have 7 minutes to go.
Roberta.
So stand up if you have a question.
Roberta, can I just talk to that for 30 seconds?
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that we recognize this is not an impossibility. Those 38 laws that we passed to create the benefit corporation legislation, 28 times those votes were unanimous. 28 times. The idea of getting business engaged and solving this challenge is not a left or right issue. So I totally agree with you. There is a way to do this that brings everybody into the game.
Okay, there always has to be a skunk at the garden party. Turns out it's me. If you look at why solar energy is cheap and you look at why wind energy is cheap, they weren't cheap.
Right.
But they're on a production cost reduction like all other technologies. So the more you build, the cheaper it gets because people are smart and they learn how to do it better. In solar, every time you double the installed base, the price goes down 24%. 1980 solar wasn't competitive. If we'd never put in policies that incented solar, it would not be competitive now, but now it's cheaper than fossil fuels. Policy really matters.
And hi. Oh, Tommy?
Just to add a little bit also is that corruption is also not a left or right issues. So I think when...
Yeah. Thank you, Tommy.
And I think whenever policy starts to get really mucky and everything, then somebody tries to be ahead of the other guys and by bending certain things. So I think it's beyond left and right, all these things. Let's agree on the most important things for the humanity, all the shared goals.
Yes. I don't want to forget, we have 6 minutes to go. We have Sustainable Development Goal pins for all of you. That is your parting gift. You can never get them at the UN store. They are sold out. They always say, come back in 2 months. So Claire, where are you? Claire's in the back. Okay, she's got the pins to hand them out, and she went to the source for the UN pins to get them. So they're yours.
Hi, everybody. My name is Frank Connolly. I'm a co-founder of a company called Lumen farm. We're a platform that empowers consumers to use their personal values to make purchasing decisions. The idea is you would have a conversation with us about your values and then have a tool where when you're shopping, next to the price of every product you're looking at would be a number from 0 to 10 that tells you how well that specific product meets your unique value set. Thank you. We are deeply aligned with this panel. We're a pending B Corp, we're a public benefit corp, we address 14 of the 17 SDGs, we embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion in our culture, we embrace consciousness in our culture, and we love you all, truly, like we're grateful for where you've been. My question is, we envision a future like Ashoka that says everyone is a change maker. We believe in the power of entrepreneurship, but we also recognize a lot of people have been locked out of the tools necessary to be truly effective entrepreneurs. And we don't need the entrepreneurs of the past, we need the entrepreneurs of the future. Really incredible, impact-conscious entrepreneurs, women like the Compton Kids Club. Imagine those young ladies as entrepreneurs. We think that's an exciting future. So my question to you is, how do we think about an ecosystem change that brings the mentorship and education resources necessary, and just as importantly, the capital change, where we change the flow of risk capital into smaller enterprises like that support them and create a market return? Thank you.
Yeah.
So tying a couple threads together quickly, because I know we are running out of time. The good news is I can tell you there are a variety of capital sources that are directly trying to address what you're talking about. This is not starting from scratch. And so the impact investing community trying to use new capital sources to try to catalyze new entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs for good is happening right now. Secondly, I do just want to address youth for a second, because I would tell you our movement is a youth movement. And the reason why it's a youth movement is when people use our intellectual property, the B in the circle, the first place they use it is on their HR postings. It's the very first place, because they want to attract and retain the next generation of talent. And I got to tell you folks, anybody over 35 here, what kids expect from their workplace is entirely different than what we expected when we graduated. They want money and meaning out of their work. They are expecting something different from their workplace. And so one of the things that I want to leave with the youth in the audience is please know how powerful you have the ability to drive change through where you work. Demand more from where you work, where you're employed.
Yes, yes, yes. That's great. One more question.
Hi, I'm Nadia Jaksimbaeva. Roberta, happy to see you. Didn't get a hug yet. So I'm a recovering academic. And like most of you, I truly believe when I started working...
Nadia, say your whole name.
Nadia Jaksimbaeva. I was born in Soviet Union. I live in one of the poorest counties of US, Delaware County, Ohio. When I started working in sustainability, I truly believe that this is a rational problem. We get the facts straight, we educate people with the facts, and they will start moving. And imagine my shock and awe when I realized, together with all the behavioral economists of the world, that this is an emotional problem. People are deeply afraid of change. If you go to rural Ohio and you talk to 16 years old, it's not the facts that they need. It's not a rational problem. These are two different parts of the body. When I am afraid of change and you're giving me facts, I'm not stupid, I'm afraid. These are two different biological pieces. So the question for you that I wanted to ask is, how do we deal with the emotional aspect of it? Because most of us who are so in love with facts, not yet working intelligently at the scale, working with the issue of the emotional resistance to change that is blocking all of the wonderful things we're trying to fix.
Yes, great question. Yes. Thank you, Nadia.
Nadia, I completely agree with that point. And I think that in the United States, we have this huge issue, which is we don't really share a positive vision of what we're trying to accomplish together. And for us to get over that fear, it means people have to hear and believe in a vision of the future that they can see and work for together and relax into. And that is exactly, I think, what we've been missing in our politics and in our national spiritual life. It's a huge, obvious hole. That's really what Nature Calls is about. But I think more broadly than that, we need to buy into a new vision of America what it means to be an American, a relationship with each other, and a vision of the future where we understand it's not a zero-sum game, that your success is my success. When the kids in Compton win, we all win. When the kids in Appalachia win, we all win.
Yes.
When we do that, there's no reason to be nervous. If you feel secure in where you're going together, then you can relax and get over all the issues that we're struggling with right now.
We need a new story. And journalism is part of that. That was the missing, we need journalists to tell good stories. Yep. Yes?
I just have an answer to your question. Why is there no climate stories on? I left a career with CBS Radio 20 years ago to cover, I couldn't get environmental news on, to cover climate solutions, oceans, plastic pollution, you name it. Doing it as an independent has taken my green passion into the red. So a couple years ago, I decided to try having the television show the visual impacts of all the devastation, but mostly to highlight the solutionaries, the people who inspire me to do this work, because you are the ones who have the passion, the knowledge, and where the hope comes from. So I have three things to say. The reason there's no climate news show on is there is collusion to keep us off the air, the truth about all the environmental crisis we face. I've been pitching CNN for the last year. I can give you stories. So what I want to say is we can't have a democracy without an informed population. I spent so much money, I had to leave San Francisco to move to Texas. Our neighbors fought our solar panels. There is an eco-illiteracy problem in this country, and the only thing that's going to solve it, I'll bet my life on it because I already have, and a lot of time and money, until we have a program that's on connecting the dots on a mainstream platform. Because
I agree, yeah.
Only the Greens listen to my Green Show on YouTube. And
When I worked at CBS News, the president of CBS News at that time, when I did a story on the 1872 mining law fouling rivers, said, I just don't care about brown rivers. I just don't want to see one more brown river. Who cares?
Okay, so
Literally.
either help me pressure the news networks to do their job and stop dropping the ball on the biggest stories of our time, or support independent green media. Billions go into clean tech and business and everything. Nobody's been supporting environmental media, and I promise that's a big missing piece. Thank you. I had to say that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm sorry it says 0 on the clock, but this is not a zero-sum game. We are going to get this done by 2030. I can feel it in my heart. You give us hope, and no more despair. We're going to create a new story. Thank you all. Come get your SDG pins.
Thank you to Roberta and the panel. Please come out into the hallway, and you can have discussions out there. We're going to move the